Rachel, great to have you here. I was just looking at your look. I feel totally underdressed now. Clearly, we're talking about fashion today with the Fashion Accelerator. I want to talk about fashion tech and some of your thoughts and insights about that. And it's actually the first time we talk about that very vertical. So excited to go a little deeper. So maybe a little bit about your story. I know you have an interesting background as a lawyer that turned to be then eventually entrepreneur in support of entrepreneurship. So why don't you share a little bit of your professional path?
Sure, yeah. So I've always been treading between the fashion world and the legal world. It actually started when I was in college. I was going to, splitting my time between Cal for legal studies, so up here in Berkeley, and then also going down to a school called Woodbury University, which is in between Burbank and Hollywood. And at the time that I was going to school down there, there weren't many fashion programs that really had a business focus on it. So that was statistics, accounting, financial management, with the focus of the fashion industry. So I was going basically semester by semester to try to get into both spaces because I knew I was interested in both.
But you knew from the very beginning you were interested in fashion. I've got two girls at that age, so I'm not quite sure when is the time is okay. I'm finally interested in fashion because I can see that one is totally not, the other one is totally it.
Yeah. So we kind of started high school years where I was taking donated clothing with some girlfriends of mine, and we were sewing them and fixing them, and then donating them to a women's shelter that was intended for professional dress, essentially.
So you were sewing yourself?
I was sewing, and quite frankly, I wasn't very good at it, which is why I didn't go to design school. I went to the business side, but I liked it.
That call early, but also on the social side. It's not just fully focused on the business
on the business side. Yeah. So I was caught between the two, and I was also doing. My high school had this mock trial team where you basically pretended you were in a courtroom and you'd play expert witnesses, and so I liked both of them. I didn't know what to choose, so I said I'll study both. So I studied both. Yeah, so I did fashion marketing and legal studies, and then went to law school after that. Yeah.
But then now, between the flipping of the two, clearly you are on the fashion side.
Still on the fashion side for sure, but the legal background I think really helps in terms of guiding designers to make smart decisions with their partners, in terms of figuring out best ways to protect their intellectual property, to have that legal mindset to be able to say, here's the right way to structure your corporation with sort of long-term thinking.
It's helpful.
It's really helpful. Yeah.
Let's talk about the story of the Fashion Accelerator itself. Did you start it, or maybe you can give a little bit of a background for that?
Sure. Yeah. So how the incubator got started was it was incorporated in 2011. We were actually a model that was based off of another, essentially a sister organization of ours, which is in Chicago. So Macys Foundation decided to set up a Chicago incubator. So we're all 501c3s, so we're separate legal entities, we're nonprofits. The Macys one was set up 2 years prior to us. It seemed to be going pretty well. And then they said, you know what, let's do one in San Francisco. A woman named Betsy Nelson, who's still the chairman of our board. She was pretty senior in the PR space for Macys. She decided to take this project under her wings. And so it was herself and the original executive director, Jean Allen, who's also still on our board. They basically built this thing together with a lot of help and support from the whole fashion community. And
is the fashion community kind of connected in a positive way? I mean, here, because when you think of San Francisco, you think of a number of different activities and vertical, not really fashion, but I mean, I spent 3 years of my life in Milan, where everything is fashion.
Of
so
course,
whether you like it or not, so you feel the pressure.
We're no fun.
You feel the opposite. You feel the non-pressure of being, as non-fashionable as possible. Though things are changing, even from really also the outside and the office focus. It's something that I've seen the last 10 years, with a little bit more of a better sensitivity and more appreciation. But you would never think fashion first. So, what's your take?
So what happened, San Francisco has always been in the fashion industry, more inside of a lot of manufacturing used to go on here. We actually were the third largest apparel manufacturing community in the US for quite some time. So it was LA, New York, us. And then now, of course, we're seeing more in North Carolina for manufacturing, the cost of living here, and also the skill set that was here to actually run the machines and do that. That's kind of just kind of going away now. But we do see fashion, I think, in this kind of startup space in creative living. We have, of course, a lot of sustainable focused brands here, and I think that that's something that's really unique about our fashion industry. We also have a lot of the athletics and performance apparel companies here. So Patagonia
was born and raised in San Francisco.
North Face is still here.
Not very many people know that.
Yeah.
But the historical one, Levi's, right?
Levi's, Gap, of course. Gap. Yeah. And they have their own brand, Athletica, that is performance wear focused. So I think what we're seeing here is its own unique vertical for that space. And then, of course, what we have that's somewhat unique to San Francisco as well is that the festival wear, so the things that are kind of more eclectic and bohemian, and that's very San
Burning Man kind of a look.
Burning Man-esque look, yeah. And then some of that gets into the fashion tech too, where we see people experimenting with electronics for the joy of wearing something that's fun, that blinks, that moves, yeah.
So they're actually more than what in fact, actually, after you mentioned, it's true that it's enough to create a cluster. Mm-hmm. But the fact that everything is so digitally and technology centric here, makes it sound like it's been, kind of not at the front and center. But I think one of the few things that started happening is the use of digital technologies to know, to promote or to know your customer better, or to start measuring things. I think I started a whole new, vertical, a whole new area where really the intersection of the two can be of a new opportunity.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. With like Stitch Fix being here, of course, we see a lot of really innovative ways of reaching our customers and connecting with them.
Stitch Fix went public last year, 2 years ago, right?
I think over a year ago. Yeah. But yeah, so we have those kind of companies here where they're thinking about new ways to connect with their customers. And I think what's kind of interesting too is even like having Instagram and Facebook here, where that's a place where a lot of brands are connecting direct to consumer, and so to have those kind of people in your backyard, your neighbors, to be able to talk.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
because I think is an interesting area. Before we go there, just to finish the structure of the incubator, the accelerator. So what are the main companies that are backing it, and how does the process work? How do you select the startups? At what stage? What is your role? So a little bit of the ABC of the structure of the accelerator.
Yeah. So to just sort of explain, to your question of like who are the brands? How do we select the brands? So we have a studio space. So it's a nice studio space as well as a seminar room. So the studio space has work tables, sewing machines, ironing boards, space in the back for them to put all of their raw materials, and some space for finished product as well. So they're really using this space as their primary office.
Just to understand, where the space is one of the floor of one of the.
It's in Bloomingdales. Yeah, it's in downtown San Francisco, Bloomingdales, right in that Westfield shopping center. Makes it very easy for our designers to get there, and we're really lucky to have this space. It was intended to be a restaurant, never became that, and then they.
What floor is that?
It's actually on the ground floor.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it could be a restaurant, but
could be. Yeah, just didn't happen that way.
And so you guys took over.
So we took over with the blessing of Jeff Gannett, the CEO of Macys. So
how big is the space? Meaning, how many people can fit? How many companies you typically have in-house every given time? 5 to 7 at a time.
Okay, so
small.
Hands-on. Hands-on, and designers need a lot of space. Sylvia's like, oh yeah, I know. It becomes like this messy chaos, the creative work in action.
Well, how many, do you have equipment? Do you have machines? What you put in as a core tools for them to test?
We do. We have several sewing machines and ironing boards and a giant cutting table that our alumni still come back to use because it's like probably one of the biggest in the city. So have a space to be able to just roll your fabric out.
So why do you need such a long a long
So
cutting
you
table.
need a really long cutting table because think about making your cutting out your garments, right? And you want to try to do it as efficiently as possible. So you're kind of like creating a puzzle piece. So imagine you've got basically like a piece of paper or a muslin cut of what your pattern of your product's going to look like.
Yeah.
And then you want to be able to kind of lay out your fabric on a nice big long space so you can sort of puzzle piece, how am I going to cut this thing in a way that's saving as much fabric as possible.
Are you going to do that digitally? Again, my mind is always like, that you would do much easier on a screen, right?
For sure, that would be ideal if you had the equipment, but those kind of machines for young designers to get access to can be quite expensive. And then again, you're trying to then rent out space to basically use the program, and ultimately you'd still kind of need to have that laid out for the scissors to go down. So for when our designers are not, most of them are not cutting and sewing everything that they're going to sell by hand, but when they're making samples, when they're trying to figure things out, they're doing that on these tables. And
before that, is this still the case? They do it with paper to do the first, alpha prototype on paper? So
So we also have the paper there too. So you'll see them roll out the long paper, and then it's got kind of like alphabet and letters on it, and you draw it out, and then that's actually what you're ultimately then going to take to your manufacturer and say, okay.
So you show the piece of paper that's
you're
been
literally
stitched together.
showing them, see, stitched together. Here it is. Here's my samples, and then you refine it from there with your manufacturer. But it starts with like kind of an arts and crafts project on this giant
probably
table.
also because designers need this manual feeling of also the garment itself. You would think that most of that could be done digitally in a way much more efficient, probably cheaper, just the design of it.
But there's something about seeing the fabric yourself, and just yesterday we had like a consulting mentorship consulting session with one of our designers in residence and somebody who's a production expert, and we're back to looking at it and going, oh yeah, how strong is this fabric as a bag, and if we try to pull it, and so you just kind of got to do it by hand and see whether or not the threads are fraying out and how much weight does it feel like it can hold.
So the typical founder there is a designer, right? It's not a digitally native that want to turn into the design that wants to build stitch fix.
It's yes, and there's plenty of great incubators. I think in San Francisco alone, that would be fantastic for retail tech companies. We're not that. We are product-based companies. We are really trying to help people build a brand that sells physical garments, accessories, shoes. We're not the ones who are saying, how do we just sell these things? Now, many of our brands, of course, are looking at what's around us in Silicon Valley for innovative ways to reach customers, but they're ultimately making the products.
Got it. Yeah. So the designers really that you want to build and help with the business decisions around that product first.
Yeah.
And so how do you select them?
Yeah.
What's the process?
It's a little bit of us looking out into the world and them finding us. So one of Sylvia's great projects for me was taking looking at who's out there. Sometimes we find brands, like one of our brands that's doing really well in the incubator right now. He started a little over a year ago, so you're constantly looking to see who's out there because sometimes these young brands don't really take
When you say
off.
who's out there, the interesting designers that you can filter.
So we're looking for interesting.
So not necessarily business, right? I mean, you're looking at.
We are looking. So designers, but we are actually looking for a history of sales and traction. We're kind of like scoping out like who's the hottest new brands of San Francisco. So that's going to local trade shows or things like West Coast Craft or Renegade, where they have the booths set up, and we're literally just walking around going, what do we see? Do we see a lot of people looking at their stuff? Does it seem like there's interest there? Do they have something? What's the overall branding?
Isn't there a filtering or price for the best new designers when it comes to fashion? I mean, I just wonder, what are the channels that you use then to filter the most interesting
really find
up and coming?
So I mean, CFDA, of course, in New York has some innovative designer awards, and it's really just because we want to have them here in San Francisco. So we are a nonprofit, and our mission is to support the fashion industry growth here in San Francisco. We think that the best way for us to be able to do that as a nonprofit is to have like basically burgeoning designers who are doing well. If we can give them a little push with expert mentors, with connections in the industry, with subsidizing a lot of their business costs because they're working out of our space.
For how long? What's a typical average? Do you go by batches, or is that
No, we don't. We do kind of do these like recruiting seasons, but we take them for 6 months to a year and a half.
You don't do the summer and the spring.
We don't. No, and that's really intentional because what we want to do is make sure that they are leaving our program when it's an appropriate time for them to have that soft landing. So it's always a kind of a constant conversation of, is this program still working for you? Are you outgrowing us? Are your business needs changing?
So it's a mutual decision when you say, okay, I think it's time for you to get out of here and get on your feet.
Yeah, so it's definitely like a consistent conversation to make sure that they're prepared for it. Some designers do get very comfortable there because, I mean, we take care of everything. Yeah.
And what's the deal for you? I mean, you're a nonprofit, you said. You don't take equity as a nonprofit.
We don't take equity as a nonprofit. They are paying $525 a month to be there. That's helping us to pay.
Which is the bare minimum in San Francisco
Totally,
to get a space where you can actually use a restroom.
Yeah. So that's helping us. Our insurance is somewhat expensive because we have irons and sewings and and all that. So it's handling those kind of costs, and it's also ensuring that the designers are feeling like really connected and like they're having to kind of put a little something in to get all the support back. So it's not just one way.
What is the also the support or the expectations from some of the major? So you mentioned the brand that are supporting Bloomingdale, Macys.
Bloomingdale's, Macys.
Well,
so Macys. Macys owns Bloomingdale's, and so we used to be in the menswear building of Macys that was on Farrell Street. When they closed that, Bloomingdale's very graciously took us on in this new space. There's not a ton of expectations from Macys. They do this really out of generosity and trying to give back to the community.
Is there a foundation behind it?
Yeah, it's the Macys Foundation. So there's now 3 of us, 3 incubators. There's the Chicago one that I mentioned, that was the original. There's us, and then there's also one in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And we all have somewhat similar programs. Everybody does it a little differently depending on their, I think it depends on their own city. We all have this little sort of unique microclimates, and then also with the staff can handle the expertise of the staff.
Can you tell us some success stories out of these? How many years total? Been running?
So we've been going since 2012 was really our first group, and at the time that we did it in 2012, we did do it sort of classroom style, more cohorts.
Right.
Everybody comes in, everyone comes out. We found that didn't really work because the designers are all coming in with businesses that are at slightly different stages, and what we would find is like they're talking to you about one issue that they have, and then as you dig a little deeper, you're like, oh wait, no, actually we have this other issue that we need to take care of first. And so when we were doing it classroom style, they didn't all have the same issues at the same time. And so we found that it was more effective to do kind of one-on-one mentorship with them. And so they got the support that they needed at the time that they needed. We've had quite a bit of success from our designers.
So maybe should I rather ask, how do you measure the success? Because now, I mean, if you're an investor, it's pretty clear the return.
Right.
That's what matters. In your case, it's a little more complicated to measure.
Yeah. So if you go back to the mission of our incubator, the goal is to grow the fashion industry here. And for us, one easy measurable way of doing that is how many jobs have we created? Mm-hmm. And so at this point, we've created over 500 jobs with the designers that we've had in our program.
Wow. And it's always been an average of 5-6 companies at a time, so pretty small. Mm-hmm. So that's
pretty small, yeah. And so usually when they are leaving our program, they're at that point where they're going to be making those first hires. We're already seeing that with some of the designers that we have currently in the program, where they're like, oh, I need to start hiring somebody part-time to help me with, fulfillment, boxing, shipping, getting things going.
Tell us the
social
story of one of
media.
the company that grew the most out of those.
Yeah.
I know that it's hard to tell. What of your sons you
Yeah.
like the most?
Yeah.
Just mention one.
Yeah, well, one who's great is Sarah Liller. She's still with us on the advisory board now because she was really involved with us. She's now in 48 stores across the country, and she's got her own studio.
What's the brand? What is it? Apparel?
It's called it's called Sarah Liller, and it's a women's brand, and she's really finding her sweet spot with women who are like 40 to 60 because it's beautiful, easy to travel. It's at that kind of Bloomingdales price point, and she's.
So is she selling through Bloomingdale already?
She's not. No, she's selling through a lot of like specialty retailers or boutique.
So she's still not at the size
Yeah.
that Bloomingdale can take care of.
And to take on a department store is quite
It's the
something
next big
for a brand. Yeah. And she's doing a lot of direct-to-consumer online as well. Yeah.
But what's the business model there? Again, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but once you get to a retailer at that level, what's the revenue share? What are the economics typically?
Oh, for somebody like to get into a
That's right.
a Bloomingdale's
Yeah.
that can be quite tricky because it's often a wholesale model at that point, and so you're often getting like 35 to 40% on what they're going to mark it up as.
Okay, but who fix the price? Is the retailer at that level? So
Yeah, it's
that strong brand.
It's actually usually done with the buyers in conjunction with the brand, and of course, what we're seeing with a lot of brands is that they're selling direct to consumer online as well as in the big box retailers. So you have to make some of those pricing decisions together. And the real kicker is most of these larger companies, Macys, Bloomingdale's, they will have these planned markdown
Events or
calendars,
Right,
essentially.
right.
Yeah, so it's like if they're not seeing, let's say your goal is, okay, we're going to buy all this product wholesale. And then they say, we're going to hope that we're going to sell through all this merchandise in the next, like, let's say 40% of the merchandise in the next 6 weeks. Well, if they don't see hitting that near that 40%, they're going to start marking stuff down. Now you're competing with that retailer with your direct-to-consumer sales because you're not marking your stuff down, but they are, because to hold merchandise means you're holding up cash because they've already bought it.
Right?
Yeah.
And where is all that sitting? I mean, in storage, right?
Yeah, we have, so they have fulfillment center, Bloomingdale's has a fulfillment centers, of course, and then there's smaller spaces like inside of the store that holds that stuff.
And then I'm sure there is a limit at which they're willing to price it. Otherwise, it's not good for the brand. So what is the next step if they're not sold by then?
Yeah, well, so if they're not sold by then, so at that point, let's say it's a wholesale relationship. I mean, at that point, it's out of the brand's hands. You know, Bloomingdale's purchased it usually, so it's not coming back to the retailer to the brand necessarily. But you might start to see your products get super marked down,
And then it becomes a cost, right?
Yeah, it becomes in an outlet or something like that. Yeah. So the issue with the brand is that all of a sudden your prices get diluted out, and so people are going over to the other one and get the same shoe for $50 cheaper or whatever it is.
Do you think we'll ever get into a situation where it's all produced by on demand, right? Where today all this history of having warehousing, right? Because it's the time to product is still historically long, but you would think, again, one of the things technology can do, I mean, we can talk about it, 3D printers for garment, but do you think we'll ever get it, or how far are we from made to wear?
Yeah. I think we're still fairly far from seeing that as sort of the general norm. I do believe that things like Indiegogo have really helped smaller brands get that just-in-time manufacturing plan going and have kind of trained consumers to wait a little bit, which is nice. But with fashion, I mean, unless you're really getting it to them within a week to 2 weeks, fashion is about what's hot in that moment, so it's seasonal, and so it's not like like I think of Tesla, right? I mean, they're already like pre-selling this truck that they're not going to make for a while.
In 2 years.
This is not, we're not making, Tesla trucks where you're going to say, I'm going to wait for, 6 months for this perfect coat to come. So, so I think that's the timeline's difficult.
What are the areas where actually you do see the industry changing? I mean, there's whole macro challenges that all the major retailers, no matter what industry, are facing, which is, I think, not just in fashion industry, but it's pretty much everywhere. What else you think is happening that you think are, it's kind of changing the rules of the game in the world of fashion? Maybe not necessarily fashion. I mean, apparel, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think that social media is changing fashion and consumer behaviors quite a bit. And I say this because what's interesting about what we're seeing with brands now is this consistent conversation that they're having with their consumers and the information that they can share about their products and the manufacturing system with their consumers. So before social media, you had a hang tag that you could put all your information, and it's like this big, and it's got to carry your story, your brand, and then you go into a specialty store or a department store, and you pick something, and you don't know that much, right, about the brand. But now you've got social media where you can constantly be interacting and telling your story. But there's also, I think, more expectation now to be transparent about where your stuff is coming and to have this kind of holistic brand identity. Yeah. And so, it's really changing that conversation because you're having this like tighter relationship with your customers.
How many brands do you think have been built using this new opportunity, right? So the fact that rather than going mass media with the traditional advertising is really to build a brand that talks to the consumers through social media.
Yeah. Oh, so I think a lot of the sort of newer sort of knockout brands that we're seeing, like Everlane, for example, here, because they're so built on transparency and the cost of manufacturing. Everlane does two things, which is one, they're talking about who's manufacturing your clothing, and you could dig into it and sort of see like, well, how much are they actually telling you? They tell you what the weather is there, but like how much are they actually telling you about those manufacturers? But they also tell you about the cost of manufacturing the t-shirt and what they're marking up, and that transparency we've never seen before in fashion. So I think
so they're engaging with the consumer in a way that is totally new and more personal. I was reading one of the blog posts that you posted some time ago on the kind of role of influencers, and you did it probably there also with your hat as a lawyer, right? So what kind of a business model, what to expect, will make sense to get paid, what are the boundaries of that new world? What are your thoughts today, if you were to give some highlights of with today's world?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the role of influencer marketing is super interesting. One, from the sort of branding side, but also from the legal side is super interesting. So first I'll scratch the legal issues, which is this idea of endorsements and testimonials and whether or not you're being truthful about what you're saying. So with social media, it can be a lot more difficult to tell whether or not somebody is getting paid for their review or tutorial. We see this a lot, like cosmetics tutorials.
Yeah, shouldn't there be a rule by now?
There are. Yeah, the issue is a lot
this is a paid advertisement.
Yeah. So a lot of influencers either are ignoring the laws or
there are laws.
Are
they different in every geography or?
This is federal. So this is the United States has it's called the Federal Trade Commission, has created quite a few laws on this, and they're trying to crack down on these kind of endorsements. But actually, we're seeing two really interesting things with that. One is from influencers trying to give these like cosmetics tutorials or how to style session, and you think that it's just this man or woman trying to tell you about what they like and what they're using, but actually they're getting paid by that company. That's one piece. The other piece that's really interesting is that some influencers are not being paid by the brand, but they actually want you to think that brand has paid them. So they
reinforce
to reinforce, oh, maybe Gucci or Prada or Louis Vuitton gave me this, or but they really just like went and bought it, or maybe they got it from one of the rentals or re-reel or something like that. So it's been really fascinating to watch where brands are like, no way, we didn't pay you.
So is there a lot of lawsuits behind when it started getting at the
So we are starting to see some of that more and more.
So what's the rule? If I'm an influencer, if I have a blog post, I've got not many, but like 20,000 followers or 30,000, which is today kind of the norm. And I kind of support a specific brand, but without mentioning what is my business with them transparently.
So if they are paying you, or you got something for free, you have to actually mention that. You have to share that. What we see in YouTube videos or any kind of like tutorial videos, you're supposed to give the disclaimer at the start of the video and at the end of the video, and you're also supposed to, there was this really interesting lawsuit about above the fold or below the fold.
Gosh.
So you're supposed to put the disclaimer above the fold. So where there's kind of like the read more section, you're supposed to put it above the fold.
Are those rules changing constantly with respect, because new tools and new media channels are popping up, and so the ways that people consume it is different. So you need to catch up, and I guess it's a mess.
I think this is for legislators, for the government entities to catch up with all the new technology and then try to create rules that work for all technology is quite difficult. So what we do see happening is lawyers and judges trying to squeeze something that's like, well, TikTok kind of looks like this thing. So when somebody's doing a TikTok video or a live story, where do you put the disclaimers and how do you explain these things, and issues of like, well, if the whole video can't be more than 30 seconds, where do you put in the disclaimer and the information?
So I can see also, again, from a startup perspective, a good opportunity of how to have tools that can do that kind of job more automatically, rather than having a human being there and just checking that everything's
everything's there. Yep.
What are some of the brands that are more litigious, meaning that they actually really care about the misuse of those bigger brands?
Yeah, luxury brands in general are quite litigious because they're
trademarking
French everything.
Not to stereotype.
No, but it's true. If your brand is luxury and the whole point is this is a exclusive experience, you have to get protection over your trademark. Also, they tend to be the ones that people are trying to knock off, of course, or emulate. So, of course, we see more brands like in the LVMH family, but that's because they have to protect their assets.
The main asset is the brand.
So we do see more of that, of course. Yeah.
Got it. Fascinating. That's actually very interesting areas where, again, I think some technology can help, and it's something that is moving so aggressively. What is your take on? There's one startup that we invested not too long ago, whose motto was, they're wearing technologies, right? So so there are a bunch of, now you see more and more, especially when it comes to socks. These guys were doing socks. This is Sensoria, or shoes, and some of the stuff is now in the garment. Like you put sensors are waved in between your your garment, and that becomes the computer, right? So that then you become a data generator. And do you see a business there? You think that is kind of I'm sure that on the shoes, Adidas is investing significantly, but is that also turning into the fashion industry somewhat, or is more marketing?
Yeah, wearables have been really interesting because we keep seeing it back. I keep seeing San Francisco really wanting this to be a thing.
And I wonder if it's just because there were a bunch of geeks, and so you want to wear something.
I want to be a computer. No, I do think that we're going to see it more, of course, like healthcare first. We're not seeing, what I find really fascinating, right? Like, this is San Francisco, and there's Burning Man culture here. There's a comfort with electronics and lights, and yet when you watch people going on their bicycles at night, nobody's wearing light up jackets. This is just not a thing. So I think what we're going to see first is really practical medical uses coming
this is
more
really
into play
happening,
for
but
sure.
This is
See more
different
of
from
that.
fashion, though. That's the angle of fashion to me is a tricky one.
Yeah, and I think unless there's some sort of like utilitarian purpose, it's often not being used, because we do see a lot of companies, and there are of course festival wear companies that have light up bracelets or crowns or things like that, and
those are accessories, but I'm thinking really, underwear, right? Or shirt or something that actually you wear all the time.
But I mean, like when you think about like a Fitbit, right? Like the average use of a Fitbit's like 6 months, and then people get rid of them because they don't really enjoy wearing something like that. And then the washing care of a garment, and there are some Silicon Valley people who will wear the same outfit every day, but most people do not. Yes. So the question is, are you going to wear the same shirt every day that has the sensors, or the same jacket every day with the sensors?
So you see that vision of I'm wearing my computer was still is just for is one of the bubble of our geeky side of Silicon Valley. It's far from
I think it's going to be much more compelling than I'm moving your phone from your pocket to your face or to your arm or whatever, like it's got to be something that's a bit more useful than that, because again, I just keep thinking like light up clothing, and yet nobody's wearing these things.
No, I mean I can totally see in training, right, and in sport equipment definitely, because people want to know more and better, the way they move and their training, and ways that are more sophisticated than a totally random way of counting your steps that never works, right? So that's for sure that I can see why, sport brands, especially shoes or the lights, are getting into there, because it's part of what you're selling, measurement. But fashion, I think, is tricky. Typically, technology doesn't look cool, right? Wearable, at least today,
right. And unless it's something that's inexpensive enough that you can own several garments that have the same sensors in it, it's just not. I don't think it's quite ready for mass adoption yet.
Switching gear, there is another topic that I want to address real quick with you, is really the role of accelerators as a means for brands or for mature companies to test options in the market of innovators at the different stages. So this is actually something that has been changing quite rapidly. The whole association of an accelerator, startup accelerator, that used to be, it was a big boom after 2007, Y Combinator. Everybody wanted to do accelerators. Actually, the waves are still in some countries still has to come, or you're just at a peak. I think the feeling now in the last few years that accelerator model, especially when it involves batches and sometimes and most of the time also investment, is too costly. It's kind of passé. So what is your, and again, I think in your case, the fact that it's a not-for-profit, so where the things that you're measuring, as you mentioned, is much more subtle. It's not necessarily the financial impact of the top line. Kind of makes sense, because you're doing a lot of education and really helping the industry. So that model I can totally see. But the larger market of accelerators is something that is, I think today, at least at the minimum, is under some analysis that is not necessarily positive. What's your take?
Yeah, well, I do think that we are seeing a change in mindset of both accelerator programs as well as early investments. I think we're definitely in this new wave of San Francisco where throwing more money at companies that have rapid growth isn't necessarily going to get you to profitability anytime soon, or perhaps ever, even when they IPO. So I do think that investors and organizations are kind of rethinking what it means to put money into even great teams and great ideas, and how long does it take to get them to a financially successful place. With incubators and accelerator programs, I do think there's still something to be said for giving small companies an opportunity and the resources to play with ideas in a way that an R&D arm of an established company wouldn't be able to do. And I think that's why we still see a lot of larger companies sort of keeping their eye on these fledgling teams to say, are they making something work? And I also think, and this is like one of Adam Grant's points of like, can you hire a team versus an individual? Because a team of people who seem to be working well together is extremely valuable versus just one superstar. Right. So there's something really to be said about that for an acqui-hire play.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think a lot of companies still see this as a super valuable investment.
Because it's a test bed on how people then eventually they would work inside a larger corporation.
Yeah, so you get the intellectual property developed by them, you get people working long hours on something that they're super passionate about versus being like, here's your assignment. And so you kind of see people with just natural talents and interests in a particular project, and then you can decide as a larger brand whether or not you want to pick up that group and that idea and move it in-house and then apply it to the larger company. And so I think that's why we still see companies doing that. Like LVMH does have one in Paris, and I think we see them kind of do that model a little bit. Yeah, it's a great question. As to how do you value it? For sure. I think I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
Last question about your view of the future. What do you think it could be an interesting? We talked about product, and I know your focus is mostly on product, but sometimes it's the companies as a product. Also, in the case of a fashion, do you see different business models that could be interesting and disruptive in your world that a startup can test, really to flip probably the economical model?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, so we do see our designers testing things like, even just the fashion cycle, so probably a lot of you being from Italy are thinking like, the fashion seasons, you've got your fall runway shows and your spring runway shows, and you're supposed to develop a whole line of products, and so you do these like seasons to seasons. And of course, now we're seeing many of our designers doing really well with capsule collections and having some staples that they always keep, and then they do little drops, where it's like every month or every 2 months they are putting out a few new pieces. And
so cycles are much more. So the cycles
are totally changing in the fashion industry now. And I think some of that is because of social media and consistent engagement with your consumers. And so that's something that they get to play with. We also see people engaging with, and this is very like San Francisco fashion industry thing, which is the idea of taking your own products back and trying to create a second life or a second home for them.
Yeah, more of a...
Yeah. So that's kind of a disruptive idea. We see...
More circular economy.
More circular economy.
Have a push.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because sustainability is clearly, it's not just a marketing opportunity, but it's also is a way to be identified as
the whole life cycle.
With a different community.
So somebody is consistently engaging with your brand, not just at the point of purchase, but at the time that they need to have the product, either maybe there's something with a stain removal, or something needs to get, a new piece of fabric needs to get put into it, or something, the leather needs to be replaced, and then back to, can you find another home for it? Because we are also seeing, of course, a lot of secondhand retailers coming up. So, ThredUp, Real here in San Francisco. And so if these things are going to have a second life on any of those, of course, Poshmark down in Palo Alto, could the brand themselves be the person or be the company that takes the product back and then finds a second home for it? Yeah. Great.
So listen, Rachel, great. I would invite you to come here so often so you give us some hints of how to be more fashionable. Because it's highly needed in San Francisco. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.